It's not a Black Vault live stream without issues. Tell me you guys can hear me now. I'm going to wait for this while I get something else reset up. You guys put it in the chat if you can hear me now. All right, so I'm getting some yeses. Okay, for crying out loud. It just seems like every time. All right, perfect. Sounds good. It seems like every time that I would go to do a live stream, two things happen. I think that like my workload's going to subside a little bit. I'll be able to do more streams. I'm excited to be back. That's the opposite of the truth. Sadly, then work, my real day job away from all of this, gets me pretty swamped, especially this time of year. Schools are my biggest industry. So I work in selling electronics, namely headphones. And so when schools go back, since it's my biggest industry, I just get completely buried. So that's the first thing that happens. Second thing is some kind of tech issue every time that I do this. So I'm sorry about that. Let me go ahead and I just have to reset up the windows here on sharing the visuals. And that should be good. Bear with me here. Okay. So if you've never been to a behind the scenes show, you're looking at it. It's raw, live. Anything can happen. So I'm glad that that I had you guys to kind of back me up there. I didn't go too long without the sound. The behind the scenes, I'm just going to do one piece today. Sometimes I do more than one. I try and take questions from you in the chat. Obviously, I'm broadcasting this through all the Black Vault social media channels, including Facebook, X, and obviously YouTube. YouTube's going to be the most popular. So if you like chat, that is going to be where you're going to get the best chat room. So go to theblackvault.com/live. Again, that's www.theblackvault.com/live. That will automatically bounce you to the YouTube channel. Just make sure you're subscribed. Pop in the room there. You're going to see the most people, the most action in the chat room, both in the live streams, obviously, that I do for the behind the scenes, and then during the premieres when I take the segment I'm about to record and put them live. If this is your first time, again, that kind of explains the technical issues. I don't like them, but they happen nonetheless. So what we're going to do with this segment is obviously going to break down the new UAP report out this week. As with any of these types of segments, you know, I don't script it. I have visuals, obviously, but I just kind of do it. So with these behind the scenes, who knows, there's going to be extra info. There's been times where I've just re-recorded the whole thing just because I hated the kind of the first take, if you will. So that being said, anything kind of goes. So let me go ahead and jump into this and just kind of record the segment. If I see some questions as we're recording live, then I will try and pull them in. It is very hard sometimes for me to follow the chat. Obviously, the super chats on YouTube not only help the channel, but it really is easier for me to see just because they light up with different colors on my screen, and it really really makes them stand out, but it automatically tags them on my window as well as something that I should answer or at least address. So I will definitely try and do that to you. Not a ploy to try and get you to pay money to have me answer your questions. I'll pull in ones that are not that. But again, if you see kind of it heavy weighted to those, that's kind of why they stick out on my screen, because it pulls the YouTube, X, and Facebook comments even through the group on Facebook. So it just kind of just keeps keeps flying on my side. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to go ahead now that we're done with the technical ghosts in this thing. I'm just going to write down where I'm at. Give me 1 second. When I'm done with this segment, I'll end it. And then I'll kind of come back and kind of close off the behind the scenes. So that's kind of my clip point. A little awkward when you watch it live, but it's just so I can maybe answer some additional unrelated questions to the segment. So bear with me here. We're just going to get rolling here in 1 second. That's right, everybody. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey inside the Black Vault with me. I'm your host, John Greenwald Jr., and today we are diving into the newest UAP report released, which for many was a huge fat nothing burger, as many of them likely are. For others like myself, I like to dig in, dive in, look at every single character, why they did some things, why they didn't do some things, and just kind of break it down that way, because even though the report may not have a whole lot of information we can use, there are things that you can deduce from it that if you use the FOIA, or even if you're just kind of curious and want to dig in a little bit more, it really kind of is helpful to look at these types of things in a different lens. And that's my intent for videos like these. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. Let me pull up the presentation, if you will, and some slides. I'm not going to read the whole report to you, but I am going to break down some of the parts that were most interesting to me. Now, the report was only 16 pages, and let me stress, I urge you to read the whole thing. I'm not going to go over everything, like I said, so you might find something interesting that I didn't. So it's very much a matter of perception and how we approach these topics. But what I'm going to go through with you, and I'm going to read some sections, especially for the audio version, but read some sections so we can go through it and kind of talk it out a little bit and see some of the interesting parts of this, but also some of the concerning parts as well. So for those watching on YouTube and then throughout some of the other social media networks where this video may pop up, in the show notes section, you will find a direct link to the Black Vault with the entire report so you can download. Follow along with me on this video, download it for yourself, read it, print it, put it on your wall, frame it, throw darts at it, whatever you'd like to do. But that link is there for you. Now, with these reports, even though it's only 16 pages, a lot of times they will put what's called an executive summary. So the report itself is, roughly 12 pages or so, minus the table of contents and cover page and the executive summary. So the executive summary is roughly a page, page and a half of taking the report, condensing it down, making it a little bit more digestible for those who don't like the nitty-gritty details. So that's where we're going to start, and I'm going to go through some of the paragraphs that I think properly summarizes some of the things that we're learning with this. I'll quote, "The report covers unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP reports from 31 August 2022 to 30 April 2023, and all UAP reports from any previous time periods that were not included in an earlier report. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office received a total of 291 UAP reports during this period, consisting of 274 that occurred during this period and another 17 that occurred during previous reporting periods from 2019 to 2022, but had not been conveyed in previous submissions. In other words, they're just getting the report post any previous reporting that they did, and they were in those past time frames. Really wordy for such a kind of simplistic data point. During the reporting period, AARO received no reports indicating UAP sightings have been associated with any adverse health effects. However, many reports from military witnesses do present potential safety of flight concerns, and there are some cases where reported UAP have potentially exhibited one or more concerning performance characteristics, such as high-speed travel or unusual maneuverability. AARO has deconflicted these cases with potential U.S. programs and continues to work closely with its DoD and intelligence community mission partners to identify and attribute any objects found in these cases. Additionally, AARO continues to investigate and research all cases in its holdings. While the mere presence of UAP in the airspace represents a potential hazard to flight safety, none of these reports suggest the UAP maneuvered to an unsafe proximity to civil or military aircraft, positioned themselves in flight paths, or otherwise posed a direct threat to the flight safety of the observing aircraft. Although none of these UAP reports have been positively attributed to foreign activities, these cases continue to be investigated. And it should be important to point out, if it's not obvious to you, I take away from all of this that this is just the reports in this particular period. So not the totality of everything AARO has collected. So just kind of keep that in mind, that even though it's a fairly uneventful and kind of snoozy expose of this particular time period, it is just that particular time period. So they may have other cases that have done health hazards after the encounter that maybe was not in this time period, but something in the past. So just kind of keep that in mind, that this is the lens of the time frame, a smaller time frame, not a summary of everything that they have. While this progress is facilitating collection and analysis of the UAP problem set, the continued volume and unidentified nature of most UAP is a direct consequence of gaps in domain awareness. These gaps are the direct result of insufficient data secured by radar, electro-optical infrared sensors, the presence of sensor artifacts such as IR flare, and optical effects such as parallax that can cause observational misperceptions. Based on the ability to resolve cases to date, with an increase in the quality of data secured, the unidentified and purported anomalous nature of most UAP will likely resolve to ordinary phenomena and significantly reduce the amount of UAP case submissions. To me, this is the most concerning part of this report. Now, any viewers of this channel, you'll know that I talk a lot about the secrecy surrounding UAP and why it's there, and the lack of official explanation of why it's there. But on top of that, the parallels between the 1950s, 1960s, primarily through the late 1960s, of how the government and military at that time had set up the investigations that they did. Ultimately, we refer to it as Project Blue Book, but there were a few programs in there. And how they dealt with it, why they did it, and ultimately them closing everything. And then we didn't hear about UFOs literally for decades and decades. I talk a lot about the parallels because it has concerned me now for a couple of years that is exactly what is playing out now. Now, for those who don't know me, I know and believe, based on evidence, both through FOIA and outside of FOIA, that there's something to these phenomena. I say it plural. I think that there's multiple facets to this. I think there may be multiple, well, there's obviously multiple explanations, some of which are just very earth-based. And I'm not here to argue the alien hypothesis to you, but rather that there is a section here that we humans, I think, just don't quite understand yet. And that, I believe, is evident throughout history. But when you get to the investigations, like, again, Project Blue Book, you see how that played out. You juxtapose that with how this is playing out. All of a sudden, you start to see things really unfolding in the exact same way. And this, again, has been a concern of mine for quite some time. Now, put it visually for you. It all started with a threat. Now, I'm obviously talking about Project Blue Book, but also juxtapose that again with today. That it all started with a threat, that there was a problem the military had to investigate because there was a public interest on top of that threat. The concern in the post-World War II environment, through 1946, 47, 48, that time frame when you got into Project Sign, then Grudge, and then Project Blue Book ultimately, that public interest coupled with the threat paved the way for a couple decades long UFO investigation. But the evidence, once it came out more and more, you can realize that it was much less a investigation, but rather much more an explanation. Now, that is a whole video presentation in itself. I've talked a little bit about it in past videos. I won't regurgitate it all here. But Project Blue Book was a farce. But it had to deal with those two things, the threat and the public interest that was not going away. The UFO phenomena was given more credibility at that time by military personnel and prominent politicians as it progressed, which prolonged funding and interest. You look at those former and current at the time military personnel that were saying things, sometimes in books, sometimes in press conferences. And you fast forward through the mid-60s, then you had people like Gerald Ford, prior to him becoming president, pushing the UAP issue as a huge concern and something that needed to be dealt with. A lot of this sounds familiar. You start exchanging some of these names with people today, and they fit almost identically to how this has played out in the past. Now, all of that interest, the threat, and all of that dialogue in the public sphere led to the military, obviously starting Grudge, Sign, later Blue Book, and doing the investigation for decades, looking at the cases, digesting everything, and then coming to a quote-unquote Conclusion. They concluded that the majority of the cases were explainable. Now, even by their own admission, it was not everything. There's a famous number, 701, that remained unidentified after Project Blue Book closed. However, the problem with that is once you start looking at a lot of the cases, you realize that 701 number was likely much, much larger. On top of that, a section on the Black Vault that I call From the Desks of Project Blue Book added other case files that were found from a former Project Blue Book personnel member in a garage somewhere. You realize that there were cases that weren't in the massive data set that is now at the National Archives. A lot of stuff didn't survive. It got either destroyed, shredded, or copies were taken home by other people. But the fact remains that that 701 number likely isn't accurate at all. Another quick point on that, when I posted Project Blue Book documents, gosh, probably close to a decade ago, and created this massive search engine, kind of turned into an ugly story of copyright claims by Ancestry.com. I'll bore you with that story another day. But the bottom line was it got major press and publicity. And as a result, people from the 1960s and even 50s were writing me directly because they found their citing in the Blue Book files that even though it was readily available if they cared to go to the National Archives, the resource that I had created allowed people to search for it and find it like that. And so they did. And I started compiling responses from people that stretched into the double digits. I'm not talking about hundreds, but rather probably 15, 20 people that had found their case file, saw what the government and military labeled it as, and they said, there is no way that this was the explanation for my case, and that they changed part of the facts behind it. And I started piling these up, realizing, wow, Blue Book was much more of a farce than I ever realized. So sorry to go off on that tangent, but all of the statistics and stuff that we've learned about Blue Book, in my opinion, is provably false. That the percentage of unexplained is likely much, much larger. And I think that that's an important point to punch with that particular era. So even though they claimed that most were explainable, they convened a panel back in the 1960s of scientists to independently look at the findings. And you kind of look at the NASA effort and stuff like that. You start to juxtapose all of this. It seems very, very familiar. But that being said, that panel of scientists came together, looked at decades worth of cases, and they determined that the UFO phenomena, whatever it may be, was not a threat to national security, didn't warrant further investigation, and recommended that the investigation be closed. And that's exactly what the U.S. Air Force did. They halted the investigation, they stopped it, and for well over 40 years, the government stopped talking about UFOs. It bought them decades. Now, documentation proves that's not entirely true. They wanted you to believe they didn't care, but in reality, the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, and quite a few other places were still collecting and looking at UFO reports from around the globe. So that also was a lie by the U.S. government. However, they used kind of that effort to justify them saying, we just don't care about UFOs. We looked at it. We gave it a shot, and everything is primarily explainable. The cases, and I'm paraphrasing their point on this, but the cases that did not have an explanation, they felt if they had better data, better instrumentation, or essentially more data in front of them about those respective cases, they too would be identified. That's exactly what I just read to you from this new report, that essentially they're saying if we have better data, that we'd likely be able to solve the majority of these. Well, the reality is they probably could, but it's the small percentage of stuff that truly is anomalous. Don't take my word. I'm not guessing. That's Dr. Kirkpatrick's word that he said in the congressional hearing that he took part in, that there was a small percentage of truly anomalous cases that they could not identify that they were collecting. And I did the math at the time with his percentage that he gave, it was roughly about 30 to 40 cases or so. Obviously a rough estimate, but that's a lot of cases that they've collected that would be truly anomalous. Now, what's his definition of truly anomalous? It's hard to tell. We don't really know that. But for him to go on the record and say that, that to me is a big deal. But those types of statements are lost in these reports. These types of reports say, better data, everything explainable. Well, that's probably not true, given the documented history that we can already call back on. And it's playing out the exact same way. Now, moving on from that point, this was another really fascinating section to me that I bet the majority of people just kind of skipped. Now, the 2022 report on UAP, published by the same office, headed by Arrow, and then they consulted with other places as well. I put it in quotes because it was actually published in 2023. They were very late on it, but that's why it's in quotes. The section of where they say the agencies they coordinated with were listed, that to me is fascinating because here's the comparison of the newest report, which is over here, and the 2022 report, which came out early in 2023. And you look at the growth of consulting agencies that Arrow is working with. Now, that's encouraging. It means that they really are branching out. So kudos to them, because it really shows some growth there, that they're not confining themselves to data to only a handful of agencies, but rather it's grown considerably. Now, I went through one by one. The yellow highlights are the ones that we already heard before. The ones that aren't highlighted at all are brand new, that they were not in the previous report. Now, you'll see two pink highlights in there too, which are, again, easily missed. And I'm not really sure what the explanation is here, but I think it's worthy of a mention. That in the 2022 report, ODNI's NIM Aviation, in conjunction with Arrow, made that report. This newest was drafted by Arrow and ODNI's National Intelligence Manager for Military Integration. So that's NIM MIL, not NIM Aviation. So there was a change there, that NIM Aviation doesn't even appear here. Now, is there an easy explanation for that? Possibly. But I actually tried to search in Google for this military integration, and every one of the links minus one at the recording of this video, by the way. So that could change later. But at the recording of this video, when I Googled this and tried to research it a little bit more, because that's new to me, they were all references to this UAP report. Meaning, is it new? Is it a name change from NIM Aviation? Well, NIM Aviation still has a website. So either they haven't updated it yet and this is a new name, or there was a change. Why for that change? Not really sure, but I think it's worthy of note there. The other pink highlight, ODNI's NIM Economic Security and Emerging Technology. This may also be a variation of the previous ODNI NIM Emerging and Disruptive Technology, but it's worthy of note because it is different. And the DIA is missing. DIA was in the 2022 report, not in the new one. So also of note, why not? Where did the DIA go? Did they exhaust all contributions that they can give? Is it a mistake? Your guess is as good as mine, but I at least wanted to point that out as we go through the report itself. One other point that came out that I felt was interesting, the increase in reporting is in part due to deepening federal relationships and Arrow's ability to incorporate new reports into its adjudication and research process. UAP mission partners continue to coordinate, collaborate, and streamline processes. With these new reports, as of 30 April 2023, Arrow has received a total of 801 UAP reports. So obviously showing the growth, obviously the screenshot prior that I just showed you justifies this kind of, again, explosive increase. Maybe explosive is a little bit too dramatic there, but the increase in reporting, the increase of data that's becoming available to them, it's because they are branching out and coordinating with more, and that's encouraging. The report, it may be hard to see on your screen here, but it's not really important, gave some pie charts which we've seen in the past, obviously just updated with the newest numbers. The first one reported UAP morphologies. These are the shapes that just seem to be a very elusive data set. The, 2021 classified report that I got partially released through FOIA showed that they wanted to redact, for national security reasons, the shapes of all the UAP and examples of the shapes of those UAP. My appeal on that is still open. Obviously, they have lessened that a little bit. So hopefully we'll see some encouraging results from that specific appeal. But that pie chart obviously is breaking down some of those shapes. The biggest data set, or the data portion, 53% not reported. Excuse me. So why? Who knows? But you've got orb sphere as the biggest reported shape. And then it breaks it down from there: rectangle, triangle, disc, cylinder, all stuff that you can probably just guess on your own. But interesting that the majority of cases don't even report a shape, while those that do, 25%, are round spheres and orbs. This is a pretty pointless chart, if you ask me. Reported lights for fiscal year 2023, lights, 21%, no lights, 79%. But there's so many variables in that would make that actually matter. Was it a nighttime or daytime sighting? Was it instrumentation only? If it was just instrumentation only, would that instrument be able to see or deduce lights on or off? So many different, factors there, which kind of makes that a little bit pointless. Why I point that out is I think they just like to beef up these reports. You'll notice as you go through the report too, they love to skip like half pages. They'll start a new page, just sometimes seemingly randomly. And I think it's just to increase the page count a little bit, to make it a little bit more, complete in their view. Here's some more visuals and eye candy. We kind of see these from time to time, the exact same graphics, and they just updated numbers, the altitudes of which UAP are reported, breaking it down. And then obviously the heat map of distribution of reports. This is another kind of pointless one. Obviously there's data bias here because they're only collecting it from military installations, which obviously will limit you to where our military installations are going to be heavy in the U.S. And obviously looking at other parts in the world, heavy U.S. presence, so on and so forth. So it's kind of a biased chart, but, eye candy nonetheless. Now, here is kind of a breakdown of some more interesting stuff. I hate to read a whole page to you, but again, for audio reasons on the podcast itself, I think it's important. Increased FAA reporting shifting geographic collection bias and morphology trend, which is obviously what I just went over with kind of how silly some of those charts are when it comes to the bias. Aero has received over 100 UAP incident reports from FAA that contribute to the trend analysis of activity over the U.S. and adjacent waters. Of the incident reports FAA has shared with Aero, the vast majority concern sightings of unidentified lights without specific shape at widely varying estimated altitudes from less than 5,000 feet up to 60,000 feet. None of these reports suggest the UAP were exhibiting anomalous characteristics, maneuvered to an unsafe proximity to civil aircraft, or posed a threat to flight safety to the observing aircraft. Aero will continue to add these reports as appropriate to the active archive where they will be used in the overall trend analysis. No health/physiological impacts from UAP incidents reported. To date, no encounters with UAP have been confirmed to have directly contributed to adverse health-related effects to the observers. ODNI and DoD acknowledge that health-related effects may appear at any time after an event occurs. Therefore, any reported health implications related to UAP will be tracked and examined if and when they emerge. Data and intelligence sources received through various intelligence channels. Aero's new integrated analysis process ensures the raw intelligence related to UAP from various intelligence disciplines are assimilated into all source data packages analyzed by teams of scientists and intelligence analysts. Aero's analysts scour multiple classified and unclassified databases to identify any existing data on each UAP case, prioritizing technical sensor information that yields the highest quantity of pertinent, valuable data for review. As the office employs more sensors specifically tailored for UAP detection, the amount and variety of technical data produced will increase, facilitating more and better analytic fidelity. Aero program updates in regards to the analytic division. Aero's analytic efforts are confirming that only a very small percentage of UAP reports display interesting signatures, such as high-speed travel and unknown morphologies. The majority of unidentified objects reported to Aero demonstrate ordinary characteristics of readily explainable sources, while a large number of cases in Aero's holdings remain technically unresolved because of lack of data. Does that sound familiar? Without sufficient data, these cases cannot be resolved. For the few objects that do demonstrate characteristics of interest, Aero is approaching these cases with objectivity and analytic rigor. This approach includes physical testing and employing modeling and simulation to validate analyses and the underlying theories, and then peer reviewing those results before reaching any conclusion. Look, this is, in my opinion, the more interesting part. I know it's dry to hear me read, but for those on the podcast, I think it's important to hear this as I show it to you on the video versions. You look at this and it sounds great. It seems like they're really approaching this in the right way. But as you go through this, you look at how much time they spent on what they can explain, and then just kind of like weave in subtly that small percentage of cases that they can't. And yeah, we're looking at it. But they don't really focus on that. And let's face it, that is what this is all about. Do any of us care about those cases they can explain? No, but they spend the most time on that. I think it's an important thing for them to point out. Their investigation processes are working. Phenomenal. That's awesome. Kudos to them. Let's get beyond that, though. Let's talk about that small percentage of cases now that we hear about yet again. We heard it from Kirkpatrick in that hearing that I already went over. Now we're hearing it in writing in these reports, that there is that small percentage. Now, before all the debunkers out there start screaming at me, no, that doesn't mean that it's alien. But when you couple that with the interwoven data analyses above in this report, that they couldn't connect it to any foreign adversary, it starts to get a little bit more interesting. When you add in that woven in, we tried to look for essentially U.S. assets and didn't find any. You couple all that together, you've got a pretty kind of interesting thing here. But in this report, it's like 0.01%, and it's largely lost by all this other fluff in there. Like, yes, we're great. We're identifying almost everything. And that's what really resonates with the mainstream media that doesn't really do a good job analyzing this. They'll sit Kirkpatrick down like he did with CNN. Oh, the majority of cases are explainable. Great. Who cares then? Right? Well, sadly, that is how they approach this. Not the right approach, but sadly, that's how they approach. So those are the little things that you have to look at in these types of reports, because they hide things and they subtly put in the most interesting aspects interwoven with a bunch of fluff. Strategic Communications Division. Aero successfully exercised its process for declassifying data and full motion videos of UAP events for an open congressional hearing held on 21 March 2023. This process is a complicated, synchronized effort that involves various stakeholders and information owners with differing processes. Aero is working to standardize and routinize this declassification process to ensure as much transparency as possible. Not a word I use every day. Aero has launched a public-facing website that shares information about its mission, operations, UAP analytic trends and statistics, and declassified UAP data and footage. The website will also link to Aero's secure mechanism for authorized reporting of UAP. Aero has established classified collaboration mechanisms to encourage cooperation on UAP investigation and research among government agencies. Now, this is obviously resonating with me. They're talking about declassification, a huge problem when it comes to Aero and the information that they are collecting. Now, to give you guys a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look in how I'm approaching this, and have actually for the last couple of years, is that obviously Aero, as that arm in the DoD, that's collecting all this information from not only DoD military branches and so on, but also it seems like assets outside Department of Homeland Security, like Customs and Border Patrol, stuff like that. So obviously they're going out there and they're collecting all of this information. The way to kind of nutshell what I just read to you is this. They cannot look at that and go, yeah, let's just declassify it and send it out. Rather, let's say, Customs and Border Protection or DHS as a whole, or wherever that asset first came from, that's called the OCA, the original classifying authority. They're the ones that actually have to review it for declassification. So yeah, there are some aspects of this that get a little bit complicated. But this is also, in my opinion, kind of another one of those things that Arrow is trying to make things a lot more complicated. Arrow doesn't have to do anything when it comes to the declassification. They just have to ultimately ask the agency to declassify the material, put it through the review. And I think that this is what they're referring to. I'm guessing a little bit there, but it's just based on what I read to you that I think that they're making this a little bit bigger than it should. So what I've been doing is kind of reversing this process. I'm going to various agencies and military branches outside of Arrow and outside of the Office of Secretary of Defense, which is where you file Arrow-related requests to, going to outside agencies and requesting all UAP material, including photos and videos and testimony and so on, that they sent to Arrow. Now, all of those cases are still underway. So I'm not trying to tease that I've got anything that I haven't shown you guys. I publish things very, very quickly when they come in. But what I'm trying to show you is Arrow is making it seem like they're doing this very long, drawn-out process for declassification, and it's really complicated. So what I'm doing is trying to fast-track it. That as long as for whatever reason, they would try and put this under a law enforcement exemption. And that is going to be another video, just so you guys know. That is something I've talked a lot about on social media in the last couple of months. I have refrained from doing a video on this because I was hoping to get a Pentagon comment on it. They refuse. So heads up that I'll definitely break this down for you even more. But for the sake of this video, as long as they don't say it's a quote-unquote law enforcement investigation, there's no reason that they can't declassify it. Or if it's unclassified already, there's no reason why they can't release it. So it's kind of that roundabout way of filing FOIAs to go to, let's say, an agency like DHS or the FAA or whatever and say, okay, here's a FOIA request for everything that you guys have transferred over to Arrow in the last year and a half or whatever, however long they've been around, and see what happens. And I do have movement on a lot of those cases. Will it produce results? Your guess is as good as mine. I never get excited, but I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of that behind the scenes of how that works. Bottom line, I think Arrow is really beefing up the report in areas that they shouldn't and really kind of making some things a little bit more time consuming than it should be. Because with the FLIR, Gimbal, and Go Fast videos being unclassified from their capture, and I got that in writing. They never had to go through a declassification process. They did, however, have to go through a security review because unclassified information can be controlled. But I think with those facts, I think that there's a lot of other information out there in those 801 cases that's likely unclassified and likely can be easily sanitized, declassified, and released to the public. So I'm trying, but I'm hoping that might expedite this process if Arrow doesn't step in the way and block that. But again, that'll be the topic of a future video, hopefully pretty quick. Back to the report. Way forward, the space and maritime domains need to be fully integrated into Arrow's processes. Airborne UAP continue to dominate UAP reporting, with 290 of the 291 reports from this reporting period occurring within this domain. And consequently, the relationship between Arrow and air domain elements such as NIMMIL, the Air Force, including NASIC and the Air Force Research Lab, and Air Command elements remains strong and continues to deepen and expands in terms of collection, analysis, exploitation, and resolution. Collaboration with Space Force, U.S. Space Command, NRO, and NASA is well underway. That's one thing I failed to point out to you, but it reminded me here. The Space Force was not included in that 2022 report breakdown of collaborators, but was in this report. So obviously there's movement in the space domain. And if you ask me, that will probably, whether or not we see it or not, who knows, produce the most interesting aspects of what Aero does. Because now they're obviously tying things to commercial aircraft and to drone technology and stuff like that. You look at that breakdown of the chart of elevations. Obviously, you know, we've got very much a bias in that particular domain. But when you start looking up the Space Command equipment, sensors, and the data that they collect, you look at the Space Force and the data and the instrumentation and the data they collect, that's going to change that a lot, in my opinion. Sure, you're going to have instrumentation that's looking towards Earth, not necessarily away from Earth. So it may help in certain areas, let's say at a 35,000 foot elevation. That's fine, or altitude. That's fine. But when you get above that and you start talking about instrumentation that may not be looking at Earth, but rather looking out, that is something pretty fascinating. The NRO, which although isn't new in this time period, for those who haven't seen it, look up the document that was published. I did a video on it as well on this channel of the sentient system, the artificial intelligence, highly classified NRO system that detected a Tic Tac UAP. Their words, not mine. A Tic Tac UAP just a couple of years ago. So when you look at all of that, you realize, okay, right now, sure, a lot is explainable. Small percentage of cases that remain anomalous, but when you start adding in the Space Command, the Space Force, and really start utilizing the data collected like from the NRO or from the NGA, you have a whole new world. You really do. I mean, and that's not based on any kind of guesses or anything like that. It's a whole new world because you look at the systems that those places have, and it's a hell of a lot different than the FAA or arguably even someplace like NASA. So you look at those types of surveillance systems that they have, I think it's going to be a whole new world. What we will learn as the general public, what will we, the people, hear, your guess is as good as mine. But encouraging nonetheless, and I think that internally they're going to see that data skew a lot. Case closure report. This was kind of interesting. Attached is a pilot example of the result of Aero's full-phase analytic process. The files and accompanying data in each case have been given to Aero's IC and S&T partners for their analysis, and this resolution report reflects Aero's determination based on the results. These case resolutions and accompanying unclassified analyses will be published on Aero's website. So that's all great, right? Encouraging. We're being transparent with the public. This is what you guys will get. The report itself, case, quote, Western United States. 8 May 2023 is when they solved it. And it looks, look, you see here what they do. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but key findings, intelligent assessment, case essentials. They obviously were likening this to commercial aircraft traveling on different air routes to, again, just kind of like that case breakdown summary explaining what these are. And we'll likely get a ton of these as time goes on. Solving cases, very much like Project Blue Book did, because keep in mind, those were available to the media if the media asked at the time. They were not classified. There were some classified cases, but the majority of them were open to the general public. So yet again, when you look at what they're doing here, they're going to probably bombard you with commercial aircraft, drones, maybe even the exhaust of an F-18 if they want to go there. They've already said parallax in their report here, IR glare, all things that we've seen bantered about through social media ramblings. However, here they are officially putting it on paper as explanations. So they're going to bury you in those, but those small percentage, again, those cases that were woven into this report and alluded to, hinted at, and you kind of have to put the pieces of the puzzle together, you likely won't see those. What about the Space Force when that gets into play? Are we going to see anything that comes from that? Likely not. Not the way the secrecy is going. So again, it's all about perception and optics when it comes to stuff like this. That's not conspiracy talk. That's history. And that's well documented history that the era of Project Blue Book, it was all about the optics. Hey, media, if you want to look at our reports, come on in. Let's show it to you. Look at this weather balloon case. Look at this swamp gas case. Look, we have scientists that say it's swamp gas, so it has to be swamp gas. And that's exactly what they did at the time. Here we see the roots of something very similar, but in the 21st century. A website that will have cases very much like this, that essentially, here, case status, resolved. The lights were aircraft up to 300 nautical miles away from the sensor. It's great that they can solve it. I won't even fight it. It probably is lights from a commercial aircraft. But the problem is that it's the optics and perception that they want to give. Call it psyops if you will. Call it whatever you want. Call it PR. But that's exactly what Blue Book did. The optics and perception then was that the majority of the cases were easily explainable. What they didn't tell you then was that there was a percentage that they really couldn't identify. They admitted to 701, but they likely skewed the number down. Again, verifiable. There have been books written by people much smarter than me that analyzed all that data, looked at it, and assumed that the 701 was wildly wrong. But regardless, even if it was right, they didn't want you to really look at those cases that were unidentified. Some of them really didn't have the evidence. That's fine, gonna happen. But there's other ones that just did not have an explanation, nor do they to this day. We're seeing the roots of the exact same thing. And that's what's worrisome. Because again, you're going to get bombarded by this. Look at these phenomenal pictures here that they released on the report. If you squint and turn your head slightly, you can see the commercial lights. I don't know, whatever. That's what it is, apparently. Western U.S. UAP shape distorted due to sensor vibration. So you're going to see a lot of this kind of stuff that you just kind of like fall off your chair and go, who cares? I'm not going to waste the bandwidth to load this and print it. So that's, in my opinion, the optics and perception of what we are seeing unfold. And that is kind of really upsetting. It really is frustrating. And although a lot of people see me as more of a skeptic and debunker, I guarantee you I'm not. And it's for reasons like this, because when you take history and you take the evidence that's available to us, you don't need the whistleblowers to tell us that there's more to this story than they want us to know. You don't need a rocket scientist to figure out, hey, look, their perception and the optics of all of this is likely skewing reality in order to push a certain agenda. And that agenda is to deal with the threat and the public interest, very much like Project Blue Book did. Those are the same words that we keep hearing about today. Public interest, massive public interest. We see it in FOIA documents. We see it in emails. We hear about it in the press and the press statements. The public interest is partially fueling this based on those from the military, from the government, pushing what narrative? Ah, yes, the threat narrative. Exactly how it was back then. So it's incredibly fascinating to see those parallels. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, I didn't make a slide for it, but I will link it after the show. I had received, maybe going back a year ago or so, a breakdown of Arrow's cases. Now, what they gave me was essentially like this spreadsheet graph of hundreds of 6-digit numbers. Essentially, the case numbers that coincided with cases like this. Now, case Western United States. How many Western United States cases do they have? It's such a silly way to label these things. I don't quite understand the logic there. But why I bring this up is that if you were to ask me, and this is pure speculation, put the alarm on, it's just speculating. But those 6-digit numbers represented cases like this. Do you see a 6-digit number on here that coincides with that database they sent me through FOIA? I don't. Hopefully I didn't miss it. but it's just 2 pages, so I think I didn't, but please correct me if I'm wrong. What's my point? Those 6-digit numbers mean something somewhere, and they should have reports that coincide with Western United States to a 6-digit number. Where am I going with this? I think the unclassified, sanitized, boring as heck reports are going to be what you and I are fed through that website, which they outline extensively in this report. But I believe that there's going to be another layer of reports of the ones that they do not push, the ones that do coincide with those 6-digit numbers, the ones that maybe aren't unclassified. And those are the ones internally that they're using and sharing with their industry partners in the intelligence community. You know that I'm filing requests for stuff like that because the one piece of the puzzle, which to me was useless, like what the hell can I do with hundreds of 6-digit numbers that don't coincide with anything? This comes out and it just put a light bulb in my head that there's a whole nother layer to this. Now, we can assume that there's classified reports. So no, that's not some huge revelation. But I think that there's actually another layer of published, internal published reports that they're sharing within the intelligence community that I don't think they're going to name it Western United States. They're going to have probably some other more descriptive name, but case number 752368. And then they're going to coincide that number with the report itself. That's generally how government reports work. When you have things serial numbered, labeled, whatever term you want to use for their respective operations, there's always a unique identifier to those particular reports. You don't see it here. So I'm searching for those other layers that I believe are there. So that useless document, although was kind of interesting, just got a heck of a lot more interesting to me for that. Here's the last slide. And that is the index of key terms or glossary of terms. The 2020 report had what you see there on the right side of the screen. The left side of the screen is the newest report. You see a heck of a lot more. Now, why this is interesting is a lot of these terms did not appear in the report. So generally, when you see things in an index or like key definitions is another label I've seen in various government reports. Essentially, you see those definitions or the words that they're defining in the index in the actual report. And a lot of these you don't have in the actual report. So where did these terms come from? Well, what's interesting is they come from somewhere, just not this report. You look at spaceborne UAP. They already have that defined. Sources of anomalous detections above the Kármán line, i.e. 100 kilometers above Earth's mean sea level. So they're defining all this already, just as the Space Force and Space Command collaborations are underway. Now that's good. That's, again, not a huge revelation, but the fact that they have this already set means they will likely start filling out these categories and these labels of spaceborne UAP. Airborne UAP is a given. Seaborne UAP is another given. Transmedium UAP. So I don't have to read you all the definitions. Those are pretty self-explanatory. But again, you start to see these flushed out from the 2022 report. You don't have them. In fact, range fowler, if I remember, did not exist in the newest report. So I'm kind of curious. Those range fowler reports, look, they're kind of cool to look at. But I think that what we're dealing with the range fowler reports are mostly incursions by drones and stuff like that into training exercises. Years ago, I got something very similar from the NCIS of drones going over military training installations. They were more hobbyists than like, espionage or anything like that. But regardless, it's, not a good thing to do. So range fowlers, I think, really kind of lean towards very explainable, important, but very explainable objects. Interesting to see range fowlers has dropped off from the glossary of terms. And it's, I don't want to say replaced by, but obviously spaceborne UAP and so on kind of took its place, so to speak, that's what they're focusing in on here. So I would definitely read those definitions, see the difference, because it's interesting. And I know some of these some of these observations get a little bit dry and you're like, well, why does that really matter? But what's interesting is that when you do juxtapose history, documented history, evidence from decades ago and see how things are playing out in a certain way, you have to start to digest and realize, okay, there may be some parallels here, that we're not on the path to disclosure that some people want, but rather one of strengthening secrecy. And that's a bad thing. And why I like to point all of this out is to kind of spread that awareness out there, because we can't lose sight of the ball. We can't lose sight of the finish line. Finish line meaning we have to get through this era of increased secrecy. We have to figure out why the DoD added numerous other layers to my FOIA requests, but obviously others as well. But the secrecy layers are piling on top of secrecy layers. And in the coming days, I will break down exactly what all that means, and the problem that it's caused. But above all else, what I like to point out is that entwined in some of this dry, boring, obviously government speak of trying to calm the nerves of everybody and say, oh, lose interest because there's nothing here. There are things put into there that once you pick up on, you realize there's something here. And it coincides with that small percentage that we knew about decades ago and reinforced it once more evidence came out. We're seeing that again. The small percentage is what keeps people like me around, but me specifically around, because there's something here that the U.S. military and government can't identify. And they'll admit it if you pay attention. But they want you to get lost in the fluff of commercial aircraft lights, and we can explain it. Just give us more data. Don't get lost in that. Read between the lines. And sometimes you don't even have to read between the lines. It's in the lines. You just got to read them. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're watching here on YouTube, please give a thumbs up. It is a huge help to me to have you do that. The biggest help, just share the channel. If you find these videos worthwhile, I know that not everybody agrees with me. That's okay. That's what this channel is all about. It's about the dialogue. That's why I love the live streams, because the chat rooms are always flying. There's always great comments from everybody. I love to read all that. So please, please share the channel if you find anything worthwhile. Thumbs up. If you're listening on the podcast, 5-star reviews is what I aim for. I won't tell you what to do, but just add a review nonetheless, because it helps across the board. Thank you so much for listening and or watching wherever you might be doing so. This is John Greenwald Jr. signing off, and I'll see you next time. All right. That gives the button on the break there. Give me 1 second here. If you're watching on the behind the scenes live, give me 1 second. I hope that you guys found that of interest. Doing those things off the cuff sometimes is never easy, because you never know, like, did I just make sense? And then other times, like, I'll realize, like, when that slide that I didn't make, I was going to put it on right before I went live, forgot. And then, like, in the middle of the presentation, I was like, oh, crap, I forgot to do it. So, that said, let me bounce over to the chat room. I'm going to go from the bottom up. Appreciate all. Oh, I appreciate that, Steven. It's good to see you. I really do appreciate those kind words, and thank you all for that. So what I'm going to try and do here, let me go to the starred ones. I'm not sure when these came in, so I'm just going to read them as I go here. I didn't see any that were pertinent to the video, which is why I didn't grab any. But again, it's so hard to watch those. Chef C, thanks for the support. Hey, John, Ross Coulthard said he's confirmed a large UFO being kept in a building outside of the U.S. Which country do you think this UFO is being kept? Well, Chef, I mean, it's a great question. I laugh because I don't like stories like this. Look, I like Ross. There's nothing personal here. I do not like claims like this, you know, because take a step back for a second and then look at what someone like Ross is claiming. We have no idea what country it is. We have no idea like what he's referring to. We have no idea where the information came from. It's just, he has sources and that's what he's heard. Like these are all mind-blowing, humanity-altering claims to make, that a spaceship so large had a building built around it because they couldn't move it. And he knows the location, but he can't share it with anybody else. Look, I know that journalists shouldn't burn sources, and that's fine, but I'm sorry, when you have a huge building built over a flying saucer, you likely have quite a few people at this point, depending upon what year that building was built, that would know. So, yeah, if you start giving a few details, my guess is you're not going to burn a source. But the stories just don't have any backing, and that's what's frustrating. So, not to go off on a tangent on that, it's just there's nothing to go on and to speculate about what country. I mean, I'm not going to do it because I don't know. I mean, let's just say it's true. I have no idea where that might be. Of course, people have scoured Google Earth and are trying to find huge buildings and stuff like that. But for me, I'm information driven. You know, I mean, I need more than that. If it's true, and it could very well be true, come on, let's really break this open. You know, I mean, journalists want to break these stories open if there's something to it. Ross is a journalist. If he's sitting on that type of information, why not push it? You know, and kind of the excuses of why that information is not forthcoming to fall back. I'm not going to, you know, burn a source, or it's not my place to say. No, it actually is. Let's just change the world, you know, and move on. I don't think that you're gonna see a lot of arrests if something like that were to happen. I just don't. A lot of people fall back on the whole people will get arrested and stuff like that. I'm sorry, if there's a huge alien spaceship buried under a building somewhere, I don't see arrests if somebody came out with that. So, you know, I don't mean to laugh and make light of it. It's just those types of claims are very hurtful, I think, to the bigger conversation, and that's what I struggle with a little bit, is looking into that and trying to speculate. So hopefully that you know, answered your question. I know it didn't, because I just can't. It's too speculative at this point. I'm going to switch back to the other chat feed. So if you can, just put your questions in all caps. That's a huge help to me, but I'm going to get through a couple of these. But Chef, again, thank you for your support and your question. Gummybot 9000. I love that name. I got here late and have to restart the stream, so I have nothing of value to add, but here's some dollars because you rock. Well, you rock, Gummybot 9000. Thank you for that, truly. And hopefully, as you rewind and watch the show, you'll enjoy it. So thank you for that. Morgan, thank you. Thanks, John. Yeah, Morgan, thank you. I really do appreciate your support. Christina Gomez, it's awesome, Christina, you're here. Thank you for the support, too. This was an awesome breakdown. We appreciate your knowledge and insights on these government reports for the green tea frap with chocolate chips. Yes, Christina turned me on to that drink from Starbucks. Green tea frappuccino with chocolate chips. I was like, that can be good. I ordered it. One of the best things. So good. So thank you more than all else, Christina, for turning me on to the green tea frap with chocolate chips. Not that the Black Vault is brought to you by Starbucks, but I've been on a vanilla cupcake latte kick from Starbucks, part of their secret menu. So there you go. Apparently Starbucks has a secret menu, and you can order it if they know how. Sometimes it's a crapshoot on whether or not they do. All right, I haven't read these questions. I'm just looking for all caps. So who knows what's going to come through. Mr. Big Pipes, what's your opinion on the airliner abduction videos? Funny you should ask. I keep getting asked about this, and to be honest with you, I've stayed away from it for a couple different reasons. I felt that there was enough to kind of really look at this as a hoax. But then, you know, again, being asked so many times, there was a video, and I'm going to post this out as the recording of this. I haven't yet. But Mick West, who I know every one of you is a fan of, who I very much like. I mean, joking aside, I think he adds a lot to the conversation. He and I always don't agree. In fact, disagree quite possibly more than agree. But he really adds a lot to this conversation. And he did a very clear, concise, short video on that very issue. And it was about the essentially debunking by others. And they found the graphic that they used and matched up, and how they tweaked it to again, just kind of make a vortex looking disappearance of the plane. The one that really got me was the contrail shake. So when you stabilize the video and the plane stays as a constant, the contrails are doing this. And with an aircraft, that's just not how it works. You don't have that shaking of a contrail. That above anything else was convincing to me that the thing was a hoax. But then you add in the graphics, you add in those effects and everything like that. There's a lot working against that. So what I was going to post out was a link to Mick's video. Cause again, it's like 2 minutes long. It's not long to watch. It's not like a Black Vault video where I go on for days. Rather, he's very good at just like, this person found this, that person found this person found that, and then did it that way. That to me is huge. So I think that you should take 2 minutes if you do feel that there's something to the video, and watch it. And that's what my post was going to be, is blast it out there and go, hey, what am I missing? Because I'm open to it. I haven't researched it. So as of the recording of this, I had seen enough just by looking at the video and seeing hoaxes over the years. I thought it was hokey. I don't base conclusions on me thinking things are hokey, but rather I just wasn't going to like drop everything I was doing and look into that video. But then when I saw Mick's breakdown of so many other people and what they found, to me, it was really convincing. So I'm open to missing something, but I'm sorry, like there's got to be some massive explanations for some of that stuff. So we'll see, but hopefully, hopefully someone will add something that I'm missing. I don't really know what that might be though. It was pretty convincing. Neil Morgan, what's your opinion on Burchett getting into a skiff and having another hearing? Well, there's two parts to that. With Burchett getting into a skiff, unless there's been a different post I haven't seen, he didn't say who's going to be in the skiff. We can assume it might be him, but I never assume in this conversation at all. Because the wording of his tweet didn't say I will be there. I think he said a skiff was booked for Congressman to be briefed by the two IGs on 2 different days. So look, it might very well be him and I'm overthinking it, but I never assume anything. So whomever gets into the skiff, what's very frustrating is, what are we the people going to learn? You know, when it's classified and we don't really know what's going to be said, we're going to have a whole lot of nothing to go on. So I think that it's great. It's movement. I'm encouraged by it. I actually really like Tim Burchett. I don't agree with his approach or stance on some aspects of this particular issue. And again, that's not political. That's on UAP. But he just seems like such a cool guy, you know, like, I know he gets a bad rap with some people, but look, he just looks like he's chill. He wants to get in there. He wants to, you know, figure out, what it is. He retweeted me once and said that this whole thing was a cover up. He's absolutely right. I agree that it is, but it's like a cover up of what? And I'm not sure if someone even like him can figure it out and have the proper clearances. So that's another layer to this. Just because they get into the skiff and whoever they is, doesn't mean the IGs are going to be fully open and honest with them. You know, there's that layer as well to it. So long-winded way of saying, you know, we really don't know. But at the end of the day, they're likely not going to come out, run to the microphone and say, okay, general public, let me tell you what I just found out. I don't think that they are. So encouraging, but I'm also, you know, cautiously optimistic that we'll learn anything. In fact, if you were to ask me, it's likely we're not going to learn much. Update about Archangel reads, update about October 26th congressional hearing with Skiff. Yeah, so we just went through that a little bit. Again, just kind of a crapshoot on what we may hear from that. One thing that I will, and then I'll get to your question, Aaron. One thing that I will add about the Skiff meeting, and this is where FOIA is incredibly valuable. Again, that's another thing that gets a bad rap that shouldn't. The congressmen and likely congresswomen or women that come out of those Skiff meetings will likely not be able to go run to a microphone and tell you about everything that we heard. But the moment that those Skiff meetings happen, I have to wait until they happen. I will be filing multiple cases, both to the DOD IG and the ICIG, about the material being utilized in those briefings. And I will file a mandatory declassification review request, because it's classified, on those particular documents. And what that does it will automatically mandate those two agencies to review the material. So they can't do a flat denial and go, sorry, John, top secret, we can't. The case that I file will mandate a review. And then once that review takes place, hopefully, yes, you will likely have redactions, but hopefully something will come out of that that is either something that can be declassified in the interest of transparency, but further just unclassified in nature anyway. Because not everything in a classified report is classified. We know that. They deduce things by putting a parenthetical in front of a paragraph. U means unclassified, S means secret, TS means top secret. So you can have a TS document, a top secret document. One or two paragraphs will be TS. Another one could actually be S in the same top secret document. Another one, U. Again, deducing that each of those paragraphs is classified differently and they can all reside on a single page. What does that mean? A mandatory declassification review request goes in. They look at that. Pretty much, I don't want to say it's automatic, but the unclassified stuff likely will get released. There are reasons not to. I won't get too technical here, but hopefully you'll start to see that. And then you see the other levels of classification. What makes that paragraph TS or S? And it could ultimately actually just be one line, and then the rest is releasable. So there's a lot of things that play into declassification of records, and that's why FOIA is golden and MDRs are golden, because it's a process outside of FOIA. But those two processes allow us, as we the people, to get access to classified material. Have I done it in the past? Yes. Have I been successful, lucky, whatever you want to call it? Yes. There are documents that have come out from some of those briefings, some of which are entirely redacted. Those are failures, but you at least get to see something. So kind of a crapshoot again. All of this, I love playing craps, but all of it is pretty much a crapshoot on how it plays out. But those are different ways how we can actually see some of the information. So Aaron, back to your question. Do you plan to entertain other platforms for your content now that YouTube is banning ad blockers? To be honest with you, I didn't know they were banning it. Look, I don't, the bottom line for me is I don't really follow stuff like that. I try to, but it's sometimes it's just, you get in the weeds of what social media network is doing this and that, and how it upsets people. I don't follow that as much, but to your question, not really. I mean, YouTube, look, I don't get rich off of it. I don't make a lot of money. If I did, I'd post a lot more. There's always that accusation towards people like, oh, you're making it big, you're racking in money on YouTube. Well, I don't, and plain and simple. I mean, again, if it was financially lucrative, I would absolutely post more than like once every 5 weeks. So it's a silly accusation to make, but my point being in saying that is I'm not out seeking monetization. So the ad blockers, they just kind of are what they are, and now that they're blocking it, I don't see people not using YouTube over that. I mean, if somebody wants to watch a content, and I do on YouTube, it takes 10 seconds when an ad pops up to wait for the skip ad button, and then you click that. Or if you don't have that, it's like a 15-second ad. I mean, look, I watch while I work, so maybe that doesn't bother me as much as other people. I don't really know. So I don't think so. I've tried even other social media platforms to expand. You had that oh gosh, what was it called? Now I forgot even what the name was. But when Elon Musk had purchased Twitter, I was not going anywhere from Twitter. I mean, it's one of my favorite platforms. It can get very ugly, but it's one of my favorite because information can be shared so quickly and spread so quickly, that I learn a lot from it and that I can share a lot on it. But I tried some of the other Mastodon, that's what it was. And I tried to expand that way. And there's like those short-lived hypes. And then, what is the audience when it's hyped goes down to like that within, a very short amount of time. So it's a lot of extra work to start trying to break into other social media platforms, is kind of where I'm going with that. So likely not. If you feel something's worthwhile, I'm always open to hear it. Please feel free to drop me a note and say, hey, you should be on this one or that one, but pretty hard. Grant Levac, one of my favorite people. Hey, John, thanks for all that you do. When will we see this year's Haunted Mansion at Chateau de Greenwald? Oh, Grant, um, that is a great question. I'm not sure if I posted it on my Instagram or not, but I did take some pretty cool pictures. So tell you what, after this live stream on the behind the scenes, I'll tweet them out so you guys can see it. And yeah, it came out pretty cool. We had my daughter's 5-year-old birthday party yesterday. She turned 5. Had a few people over, mostly just family and a few very close friends, and had a great time. But the front yard, I love when people get to come over and they want to take pictures and stuff like that because it's a lot of fun. So I got to hear like feedback on it. I always get a kick out of it because I love it. My kids obviously love it, and that's why I do it. But then to kind of hear other people too, it's so much fun for me. My favorite time of the year. So I'll get those pictures out. They came out pretty cool. Have you put any FOIA on the legacy program? So obviously a lot of talk about legacy UFO programs. Legacy is obviously one of those hot buzzwords about what's going on, but it's hard to quote unquote FOIA that. I mean, there's nothing to go on. What you need a name or you need an agency. The legacy type programs, these older programs that have been around for decades, rumored this and that. Where are they? Who are they? Where are they from? What's the time frame? There's so much that you have to put into a FOIA request. You can't just say, give me everything you got on a legacy UAP program. You have to have a little bit more than that. So that's why I talk a lot about, these types of claims by other people when they just lack any substance whatsoever. Very, very hard to verify and do anything with. So no, haven't put in the request. But look, if somebody has more specific verifiable information, I'm happy to dig around. But we just need more than that generic, there have been these legacy programs or the broad statement of crash retrieval programs. That kind of stuff just doesn't help. Kim Sherbinin, thank you so much for the sticker. I love the cat too, by the way. Is that I can't tell the eye color. My sister had one that had one blue and one green eye. On my screen, I can't tell if that's two color eyes, but they're such amazing looking cats. Archangel Reese again, Project Zodiac. If I remember correct off the top of my head, I don't, I forget the definition of what Zodiac was, but I think that came from a Reddit post, if I remember correctly. Um, I'm happy to address it, but I don't off the top of my head recall where that came from. If you want to drop me a note, I'm happy, or if I see another comment on it, I'm happy to address it. So I'm sorry off the top of my head. Okay, I think I got caught up. Was there any more here? No. All right. Awesome. I love doing these live streams, as I've said. So I'm just going to go ahead and end the behind the scenes. And 12 Zodiac, 12 signs, 12 people, MJ12 apparently. Yeah. Drop me a line on that Zodiac thing. Again, I'm happy to look into it. I just don't recall where that came from. Anyway, I always love these things. As I said in the actual segment, if you were there for that, thumbs up here on YouTube or wherever you're watching, liking, sharing the video, and definitely spreading the word. I know I don't post as much as I want. Trust me, I try very, very hard to do so. But I've sadly my normal day job and how I feed my family has to take precedent. But just know I'll keep you guys updated no matter what I get. X is definitely. Oh, I saw another comment. I'll get to that. Green Turtle. I didn't skip anybody. I just sometimes can't see everything. So liking the video. Where was I? I don't remember. Anyway, just help me out on passing the word of the channel and oh yes, social media. X is the best way to follow. I know it's not for everybody. But that's where I post the most because, again, it's that very quick way of disseminating information. Facebook's algorithm and stuff like that just seems to have gone so far downhill. Um, I mean, I will get uh, the reach of like, let's say I write an article or get a document and put it out there. The reach on X is so much more broad than some of the other social media platforms. I still post on there, but sometimes just the nature of the beast on X, you'll see posts there that aren't anywhere else, just because they won't make sense on, like, let's say a Facebook or something like that. So um, the show description will have all the links to the social media channels. So make sure you're there. Green Turtle, I didn't skip a question. I apologize if you felt I did. Have you made any FOIA requests based on John Ramirez's suggestions? You're the best. Yeah, when I interviewed John Ramirez, he had a lot of great information. I like John. He was great to speak with. Back then, yes, there were some related requests that I have filed, some of which I'll have to look back and pull them all up, but some of which just kind of didn't pan out, while other cases are still open. So look, I really enjoyed his conversation with me. I think he's a very nice guy and cool guy to speak with. And when it comes to FOIA requests, absolutely. I take a lot of those conversations seriously. And when there's enough information to pursue through FOIA, I absolutely will. And that's what I do. So I can have a personal, let's say, hesitation to believe something or someone, but that doesn't mean I don't pursue it. So that doesn't mean I don't file requests or try and push for information. I absolutely do. So I kind of take that personal skepticism out of it, or hesitation to believe certain things. That does not play a role in my FOIAs at all, because the worst they can say is no. Meaning, oh, this didn't pan out, and that doesn't hurt my feelings at all. That's the worst. The best is it produces something. So that's why I have no problem filing FOIAs despite what I might think. And a recent post to prove that, Bigfoot. I never thought the FBI would have a file on Bigfoot, but I found enough information that motivated me to do the request, and out popped a Bigfoot FBI file. Who would have thought? So yeah, I take personal skepticism outside of it and file. All right, that's it. Thank you guys. Love you all. Really do appreciate it. I'll see you somewhere in social media and hopefully on this channel again soon. Thank you guys. I'll see you soon.